Welcome to the Selling to Corporate podcast, where we're going to be challenging your sales beliefs around selling to corporate organizations and help you increase your bottom line profits every single month. I am Jessica Lorimer, your sales expert and guide in this world of selling to corporate companies, skyrocketing your company sales and making the impact that you really want in the world. Now, don't forget, if you do enjoy the show today, please do head over to iTunes and leave us a review. But enjoy this episode, and I am really looking forward to sharing some epic sales wisdom with you. Happy September. And I cannot believe that I'm saying that, but we're in my favorite month of the year. And that is for two reasons. One, it's my birthday. I'm going to be hitting the big 3-6 this September, which I'm very excited about. And two, it is always historically considered the best time of the year to sell to corporate companies. And in this episode, we're going to explore whether that is still the case, because obviously 2025 has been the year of chaos. And so I thought, let's, instead of re-releasing the September episode that I do every year, not because I'm lazy, but because the stuff still stands, let's go through and actually look at if that is still correct. So this episode, please grab yourself a cup of tea, coffee, whatever your drink of choice is, because we are going to start digging into the trends that you are going to see in this final sales quarter of the year. And it is interesting. Now, you may have noticed that over August, there was not a second episode that came out in August, and I have to apologise, unreservedly, in fact. I, had everything planned out, as I always talk about. I batched all my stuff, and I batched everything. And for some reason, best known to myself, I had managed not to upload the second August episode to the G Drive, where my epic podcast producer, Scott, and our epic team turn it into just, the miracle that hits your ears every couple of weeks. And I moved house and then caught COVID. And we had a family emergency, which meant we were travelling up and down the motorway pretty regularly, unexpectedly. And I just couldn't find a spare minute to upload that podcast episode, which I know sounds really silly because it's like, well, Jess, it's probably like a 3-minute job. But I don't know if you've ever had that over the summer. I planned on taking the summer off and it was insanely busy, actually. If you're on our newsletter, or I say our newsletter, if you're on my newsletter list, then you'll have heard some of the escapades that we've had with various bees swarming unexpectedly in relation to the season. The time that I got stung in a 24-hour period by a wasp, a nettle from my allotment, and a bee, and ended up on antibiotics. The house move was definitely not as smooth as planned, and we have been renovating way more than I thought. I don't know if anyone else has done this, but if you buy a house, it turns out instantly, the moment that you walk in, you suddenly realise all of the flaws that you hadn't picked up in the kind of one or two times that you visited beforehand. And so, we've been dealing with problems with the roof and an entirely flat wet room floor. So if you're wondering how glamorous my life is these days, just think about it. Every time I have a shower, the floor is entirely flat. So the only way to make sure that it drains properly is to zhuzh the water along with my foot. Obviously, these are problems that needed rectifying, but I hope that gives you a little insight into some of the ways that summer was just busier than perhaps normal. And so I do apologise that it wasn't a second episode in August. But like I say, I couldn't find the spare minute to get it uploaded. So I apologise for that, and I will re-release it at some point in the future as an extra ep. But if you are listening to this episode today, something really exciting has happened in that the Expert Services Directory has officially gone live, which I am really, really excited about. And if you are somebody who is a coach, a consultant, or service provider who signed up to be one of our founding participants inside the Expert Services Directory, I'm honestly just so grateful and so excited to be on this journey for you. And that's not something I say often, but the Expert Services Directory has been a real labour of love this year. I've been working on it for a very, very long time. It is the best service provision for coaches, consultants and service providers who want to be proactively marketed to over 16,000 decision makers across the UK and generate more qualified inbound leads from real decision makers. So if you're not sure what the Expert Services Directory is, you can now officially check it out live on the internet. Oh my God, how exciting is that? At www.expertservicesdirectory.com. That's www.expertservicesdirectory.com. And it is an incredible resource. So if you are a service provider, a coach, a consultant who's in executive coaching, who's in change and transformation, marketing, any of the kind of health and wellness spaces or the other categories that it covers, and you want more leads that are qualified in the final quarter of the year, then make sure you go and grab yourself a spot, because we are running out of spots, which is it's incredible. And I have already started, or I will have started at this point, sending out the proactive marketing emails to get decision makers looking directly at the coaches, consultants and service providers who are part of the Expert Services Directory. So if you are in executive coaching, in marketing, finance, change and transformation, leadership, health and wellness, any other kinds of coaching like neurodiversity coaching, for example, or performance or influencing, communications, culture or talent development, if you're operating in any of those categories, make sure that you do go and check it out, because we have had a user group of decision makers who I've been working closely with all year who are super, super excited to be getting to know coaches, consultants and service providers who want to deliver across the UK in those areas. And that Expert Services Directory does cover professional services, it covers charities, and it covers sports, and it covers tech companies. So if you want more leads from those industries and you are in one of those categories or specialisms that I've just mentioned, make sure you go and have a look at it at www.expertservicesdirectory.com. And I will put the link in the show notes, but sometimes it's easier to type it in, isn't it? Anyway, let's get in to the meat and potatoes of September, because September, like I say, historically favourite month of the year, from a birthday perspective and from a sales perspective. But 2025 has been a bit of a roller coaster, and like we've just talked about, even my summer, I honestly felt like it wasn't the rest period that I planned. It was more like punching myself in the face repeatedly. In a good way. And I will say I am incredibly grateful for all the opportunities that this summer provided in terms of learning core life lessons that I have not historically been very good at learning, like patience, for example. So, there have been benefits to it. And I am so happy because we are in the new house, and it is lovely despite all of the quirky issues that we keep finding. But it has been just one of those years. And I think a lot of people have felt that in 2025. For a lot of people, this has been a year of turbulence and chaos. And I think that with that in mind, it is a really good time to talk about the sales trends, specifically in the B2B space for the rest of the year. Because whilst September is usually the best time to sell to corporates, you need to understand whether this year is going to be the same or whether there are other things that you need to take into account. Now, obviously, when I started thinking about this episode and putting it together, I always like to start with the wider sales world. And there's a reason for that, because the wider sales world massively impacts the B2B space, and specifically your ability to sell to organizations. Now, why is that? Well, different things that happen in the market and different trends that come up mean that it is easier or simpler or more saturated or more complex to successfully sell your services into corporate clients. And I think that there are a lot of things happening this year in the wider sales market and actually the wider economy that are having an impact for people, or will have an impact for people in Q4. And I think, now is a good time as any to be talking about that, because we've all been seeing things happen this year and things change this year. And perhaps you're not feeling as confident going into the final quarter of this year as maybe you did in January. Maybe you haven't ever really had that new year, new start feeling. And September is normally that time, right? September's normally that, oh my goodness, it's a second wind. It's really exciting. We're coming to the end of the year. It's going to be amazing. And some people this year, that's been slower than normal. Maybe this is your first feeling of new year, new start, and if it is, that's okay. But because of some of those things that are happening in the wider sales market, it's creating a little knock-on impact for people who are selling to corporates and impacting corporates themselves. So let's dig in and look at the wider piece and then start looking at how that is going to impact you and your sales process for companies specifically. So when we start with the wider sales space, it's always easiest to start B2C, business to consumer. So for those of you who are also navigating selling to individuals directly, you will be noticing that there are some interesting / worrying trends for income grabbing that are happening. Now, this is where entrepreneurs are not making the money that they want. So they're using, I'm going to say interesting, and we all know what that means, interesting psychological drivers to try and generate as much income as quickly as possible. And I've talked about these 3 psychological drivers. I actually wrote a book a few years ago. I honestly wouldn't bother reading it. If you're interested in selling B2B, it's not relevant to you. But this particular chapter that I'm going to talk about in a second is if you're just interested in how people buy or how people influence you to buy. But I wrote a book a few years ago called Smart Leader Sell. And in the book, I talk specifically about some of the reasons and some of the sales psychology that gets individuals to buy. And there are actually 3 main reasons. And they, used well, are powerful and ethical and, create really supportive sales processes. Unfortunately, when the market is tougher, and it has been this year in the B2C space, so if you have noticed that when you're also running a B2C revenue stream, perhaps you do one-to-one coaching directly, or you've tried to, create an online course or something and do a big launch and your funnels have flopped and whatever, you're not alone. Loads and loads and loads of multi-6-figure and above entrepreneurs this year have found that their launches have not been as successful. And if they're finding it, then it's no surprise that you would be, right? But what happens when the market gets tougher is that people use these 3 psychological buying levers, if you like, badly. And they do that to generate income as quickly as they can. And, they do that to make sure that ultimately their own sales process is propped up. And, that can be problematic for the rest of the market, because it means that there are some entrepreneurs who will rely on these levers and who have the right personalities to use them and will be super successful, but not necessarily super ethical about it. And there will be some people who try and retain their ethics and integrity and therefore don't use these levers in the same way, and they end up losing out on sales, and they end up in a position where actually their business is just not commercially viable. All right. So the 3 psychological reasons that people buy that I talk about in that book that I wrote years and years ago, one is aspirational. Okay. So think about it, used well, this is how can you do something or achieve something that you previously have felt isn't possible for you. Now, the weight loss industry used this for years. They used comparison pictures of transformations. If it's possible for this person to eat healthily, change their lifestyle, do these things in the right way, then it's possible for you too. Used well, used ethically, it's absolutely not a problem. However, when we start looking at people and entrepreneurs specifically looking to sell to consumers as an income grab, then it can be more challenging, because actually this aspirational lever becomes everybody emulating the same particular lifestyle that is either unattainable for most people or unwanted by most people. But it creates this sense of keeping up with the Joneses. So I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but when I was in my 20s, I was working in recruitment. It was a really fast-paced environment. There was a lot of peer pressure to do and achieve certain things. And some of those things were really healthy, right? Some of those things were around actually performing at my best and billing the most money possible and retaining that sense of healthy competition that allowed me to be a top biller. Some of the things that I saw were not healthy behaviors. And there was this sense that in order to be classified as successful, you also had to emulate these unhealthy behaviors. And I see that a lot in the B2C realm. Okay, people are selling these aspirational lifestyles that are unattainable. Perhaps it's the whole, you can make millions just working 10 hours a week. But they forget to mention that actually it's probably like 10 years of 10 years of work that go into making that happen. Sometimes it's talking about income claims. You too can sell a, I don't know, 50K a year mastermind or, one-to-one coaching or whatever. And they forget to mention that actually, that's quite a time-consuming revenue stream to build up and actually manage and maintain in the right way. Essentially what we see in this trend is this idea that everybody has to want the same lifestyle, the same amount of money, the same things. And that's to create, like I say, the keep up with the Jones or the Joneses type situation, which means that more and more people will buy from them because more and more people think, this is what I should want. I should want to earn X amount a month. I should want to have this amount of time off. I should want to travel this much. I should want to do whatever. When the reality is, if I think about my lifestyle, and my CFO laughs at me all the time about this, I frequently say I'm like the least aspirational person. I'm really, really fortunate in that I have a sales process that I've honed to within an inch of its life. And my companies make great money and good profit margins because as a team, we work very, very hard here to make sure that our clients are catered to and that we do the right things by people. And that means that we are able to continue generating good results for clients, means that we're able to continue generating new business. But I myself live on a very, I'm not spending thousands and thousands a month, My biggest, God, this is so cringe, but my biggest excitement and disposable income spend every week is the fact that down the road from our new house, actually, and I'm very excited because it will be a much shorter walk, but down the road from my house, probably, I don't know, less than 750 meters, there's this amazing cake/sandwich shop. And it's tiny, literally you can only fit 3 people in at a time. They put 4 little tables outside of it. It's next to the canal. It's very, very pretty, but very, very small. And they sell the best jacket potatoes I've ever had in my life. A normal jacket potato, people put it in the microwave and it's soggy and it's not great and it doesn't really do anything for you. Well, they don't. They've got a proper little oven that is just for jacket potatoes and they cook them so they're crispy on the outside. And, I always have tuna because, tuna mayo on a jacket potato, there's nothing more glorious. And it's £5. And I would say, I don't know, 3 times a week, I go and get myself lunch, jacket potato, £5 and a sparkling water because I'm such a creature of habit. And a sparkling water these days is £1.20. So £6.20. So that is £20 a week, just under, that I am spending on lunch. And for me, that is that freedom. It's that freedom to be able to walk down and get a jacket potato and not have to worry about cooking myself lunch or cleaning it up. It's not the most aspirational lifestyle out there. I'm not chartering a yacht every, year. I'm not, going out and doing things. Don't get me wrong, I'm making smart investments into my future around things that I would consider non-sexy and kind of boring, like my pension and property and, that kind of stuff. But day to day, the reason I'm not shouting on the internet about my aspirational lifestyle is because I'm literally sat at home, chilling out with my dog, buying a nice bottle of wine at the weekends and eating a jacket potato 3 times a week. It's different, right? Everyone wants different things. But the point is that aspirational, this lever of aspiration is difficult because it puts everybody into this false sense of feeling like they all need to be living the same lifestyle. And that can be really, really difficult because it means that people invest in things they often don't want or need. The second lever that we have is the emotional lever. And I actually think this is the most problematic when used badly. Now, again, all of these can be used well, right? In the B2C and sometimes in the B2B sphere, but primarily B2C. So emotionally selling done well is about having a good relationship with your seller and buyer, right? So what that means is being able to be consultative, being able to support your buyers to feel like they're on the journey with you, right? And we see this a lot from Instagram influencers. Real people. I follow some of them online actually. There's I can't remember what her name is now, but there's this really cool girl on Instagram and she tries on clothes and she's like the same height as me and same body shape as me. And she tries on all these clothes and she just basically shows you like, okay, this looks good or this actually doesn't, or, bought it in this size, but it turns out it won't really fit across one of my thighs and, that kind of content. And anyway, she went on to create like a jeans brand and it's been super popular, there are other people who do it and it is primarily the kind of Instagram influencer generation that can do this really well because people feel like they've been on the journey with them to understand something or learn more about a topic or, discover something about themselves. Now, unfortunately, done badly, this is used in the B2C world as a cash grab or an income grab by describing some kind of traumatic situation and making their audience feel like the only way to help them is to buy from them. Now, years ago in 2014, 2015, we would have people genuinely describing the worst moments, the most traumatic moments of their life and being like, I just, they'd sit on the internet crying on a Facebook Live, fine, whatever. And at the end of it, they'd be like, and if you want to help, you can buy this course, or if you want to help yourself through an experience like this, you can buy this thing. And that's really difficult. That is what I would call pimping your pain for profit. And we see this a lot during these periods of time where people are looking for an income grab, because when we are emotive, what's being taught across the wider world is that vulnerability sells, authenticity sells. Now, unfortunately, vulnerability and authenticity don't just mean sitting on the internet having a bit of a cry and making people buy from you. However, again, unfortunately, as with everything, every good idea, someone takes it a little bit too far and then they realize that it works and then, a bunch of other people emulate it and blah, 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 blah. So we get into this situation where actually emotional selling used to be this cool thing where people would bring people along on the journey of some kind of self-discovery or whatever, and then they would sell something to those people who, wanted to be involved, wanted to support, right? Now it is a lot of pimping your pain for profit and hoping that by kind of sharing these traumatic experiences, people pay you. Yeah, I guess everyone knows what I think about it now, so I can stop that soapbox. And then the final lever that we have is fear of missing out. So, again, used ethically, this is about saying, or historically was about saying to people, hey, look, if you are this kind of person and that mirrors these other people that are already buying this thing and are doing well with it, then maybe it would suit you. Okay. And it's encouraging this sense of community and fostering that sense of community so that people can, decide or make a more transparent decision around buying, right? I would actually say that case study episodes on this podcast are an ethical fear of missing out sales tool, right? They have people in their own words describing their journey with selling to corporates and how they've used specific resources from me in order to do that and achieve that. When it's used badly, fear of missing out is more around harnessing that impulsive buying behavior. So it's encouraging people to buy things that they wouldn't necessarily buy, or that they wouldn't necessarily buy now, by using usually false reasons of urgency. So heavy discounts or flash sales, or timers, like the sales pages with countdown timers that 24 hours after the timer has passed, they'll say, oh, there was a tech issue. And so here you go, have another 12 hours or whatever. And the reason that this isn't particularly ethical is obviously, I would imagine, quite obvious to everybody, but it's not ethical because it's not real. It's creating a false sense of urgency. It's not about fostering community. It is simply a cash grab, which is fine. I am not here to judge people for selling. I think, if you want to be a salesperson, you get to choose how you want to do it. I also, though, think that we should be transparent about, how we're selling and how we're encouraging people to buy, and whether that experience is good or not for the customer. Yeah. Now, it goes without saying that when we see these income grabs in place, this changes the market because, and it has to, right? Because there are other economical and political factors at play here. And namely things like in the UK, certainly the middle classes and people who have less disposable income are being squeezed tighter than ever before. And so there's a lot less in terms of disposable income from individuals, which means that, whilst these tactics, and I do want to stress this, these tactics, or these levers, if you like, have basis in ethical sales processes, and they do, and they can be used ethically and they can be used with integrity. Unfortunately, when we go into these recessive periods, they tend to get used more and more and more badly and more and more and more frequently because everybody's out for the cash. And that doesn't always mean that the service provider is able to prioritize the high quality customer service that they might have once had. It doesn't mean that they're always able to prioritize the same sense of delivery and integrity that they might have had around delivery, because they are in this kind of fight or flight panic mode around their own income. Now, again, it's not a judgment. This is not me judging the online space, contrary from perhaps normal service, but this is me saying that, this actually massively impacts the B2B sales space. And for two reasons. One is, when people are struggling to generate income in the B2C space, so where they have historically generated income from, product or service launches, where they've been having funnels, where they've been able to spend lots and lots of money on ads, all that kind of thing. One is that their costs start ramping up significantly. The funnels that once worked stop. They have to spend more money on ads. They have to spend more money on technology to keep up. They have to spend more time on social media creating content. They have to spend more time on, somebody who can create that content for them or schedule that content or whatever. So the costs go up. And actually, that means that their profit margins go down and that their time in their business increases massively. So at that point, when they start realizing this, they go, okay, right, I need to sell to corporates, because corporates have money and they will probably want to buy from me. And so we see this huge influx of people who have maybe never sold to companies, and they go and start targeting them. And actually, a lot of these people are good salespeople, right? They might not have ever sold to corporates before, so you might be thinking, well, Jess, who cares? Like, there's enough work for everybody. Yes, there is. The problem, however, is that a lot of them are not always used to delivering the service and transformation level that they say they can. They're not usually held accountable for it. So when they start going and working with corporate clients and they're not able to deliver the service level that they provide, that they promised, or the transformation that they promised, what happens is that company and those decision makers become wary of external suppliers. It doesn't mean they don't hire external suppliers, but it means that the sales process that you have to go through becomes exponentially longer because you have to prove more stuff. You have to prove that you're qualified because that person didn't. You have to prove that you can deliver at the capacity that you said you could because that person didn't. So them coming into the market is not a problem. Absolutely not. There is enough work for everybody. But them coming into the market and not being able to deliver at the level expected is the issue, because it puts extra strain on your sales processes and it reduces the trust that decision makers have in external suppliers, right? So that's the first problem that it causes. They all realize, oh my gosh, got no cash, gonna go and sell to corporates. That looks like a good idea. Or, this is possibly my least favorite, or they realize, okay, cool, our audience or my audience isn't buying the stuff that I normally sell them. So I'm going to go and sell something else to them. What looks like it's selling right now? And the reason that this is my least favorite is because then you get a load of people who will go, do you know what? Loads of people are talking about selling to companies now. I'm going to say that I can teach them how to sell to companies. And I can't remember what year it was now, maybe 2023. I'll have talked about it on the podcast. There was one year I sent out over 80 cease and desists, right? Because this exact thing happened. People weren't making money in their own areas of specialism. So they would do things like transcribe entire podcast episodes I'd recorded and turn them into mini courses that they were selling. Free content into paid courses. Unbelievable. They would buy stuff from us and they would resell it. It's why we've invested a lot of money into software that tracks my content these days. And it's, there are lots of other protections that we've put in place. It's why I'm so anti using AI in any of my programs, because we don't want our stuff getting into open source technology, because it wouldn't be fair to our customers who paid a lot over the years to access those things, right? And you might think, oh my gosh, Jess, like how silly are you? What a shame for you that you don't believe that the way that you do it is so unique that, people could just buy from you. At the end of the day, I'm a businesswoman. And my job for my business is to be a good salesperson and also to protect it, right? And so at this time, we have people who are maybe not making the money that they want to be making in their own business and area of specialism. And so they go, okay, I'm going to teach something else that looks like it will make money. So this is where we usually historically have seen lots of people in the health and wellness space. And it always happens to people in health and wellness. And I feel so bad about it, because actually health and wellness is such a great specialism. There are so many amazing things that, can be done with nutrition and mental health and sleep and, chronic illness and all this kind of thing. But we used to see it a lot. People go from being a health and wellness provider who are super qualified with good certifications from regulated bodies, and then they go, okay, I'm going to be a business coach, right? Because that's going to make me more money. We see exactly the same thing happening in the online space, where we see a bunch of people go, oh yeah, I'm a general business coach, or I'm a marketer, marketing, whatever. And I'm going to go and teach selling to corporates because I used to work in a corporate function, right? They might have worked in HR or, marketing or finance or procurement or L&D or whatever it is. And they go, well, I once worked in a corporate, so I can definitely teach how to sell to corporates. Yeah. This is not a good idea for them as business owners. If that's what they want to do, whatever, knock yourself out. But for you as somebody who's trying to learn, it is not a good idea for you to buy from somebody who doesn't have a corporate sales background and specifically new business, right? I don't care whether you buy from me or not. That's not really of interest. What I do care about is that if you are going to buy from somebody about B2B sales, that person has the relevant experience to support you. And if you are trying to sell to corporates who are new customers, then their background in HR or procurement or finance or wherever is absolutely not relevant at all to generating new business, which is what you are trying to do as a salesperson in your own business. So if you're going to work with somebody who isn't me on selling to corporates, not an issue, but please, please, please make sure that they have extensively worked in new business development and at a high level. Because being a marketer or being an HR person or being a COO or being a head of procurement, all these things are amazing and they will have incredible specialist skills that they can teach you, but it won't be B2B sales. All right. So these are the issues that we see. And obviously, the first one causes slightly more issues for you as somebody who is selling to or trying to sell to organizations, because if lots of people come into the market, they don't actually provide the service that they say they can, it then means that you have to do more, qualification and justification inside your sales process. Okay. So that is your kind of B2C lens, if you like. How is the B2C world going to impact the final sales quarter of the year for you? Well, hopefully not negatively, right? Because we would hope that you have, by this point in the year, a strong sales process that is made up of solid lead generation. So either having a way to proactively target, identify, approach, and turn those cold relationships into qualified sales calls, of which you want at least 5 per month, just as an FYI. We would hope at this point in the year that you have a sales call structure and an ongoing business development process that allows you to build, maintain, and leverage relationships with decision makers. And out of those 5 sales calls a month, if you're not closing 3 at least into sales, then that's a sales problem. And we would hope that you have a delivery process that allows you to deliver an excellent experience to your corporate client that allows them to want to work with you in other ways or be able to support you in generating further new business from those opportunities. So if you're not getting people who say, how else can we work with you? Then again, you might want to think about how you're cultivating that delivery and upsell, delivery and resell part of your sales process. We also have other things that are happening around the world that are impacting or will impact this final quarter. And I'm aware at the moment this all sounds maybe a bit negative. It's really not. This is just me being transparent about, what's going to happen in the final quarter of the year so you can understand how you can prepare your sales process for it or what you can reasonably do now that will allow you to generate the revenue that you want to generate, but in a way that is ethical and that isn't having to use underhand sales tactics that don't make you feel great about doing it, right? So when we look at the wider world lens, right? So we've looked at the wider sales lens, which is how is, what's going on B2C impacting how we will sell to companies. When we look at the wider world lens, over the course of this year, certainly in the UK, companies got absolutely stiffed in the spring budget. And you might be thinking, and, personally, we all have these thoughts, right? Well, isn't it about time that supermarkets paid more tax? Isn't it about time that, CEOs of companies got paid less and, gave more to communities and things? Completely agree. Like, just so we're all on the same page. However, companies in the spring budget in the UK found it very, very difficult because a lot of the economic problems that the UK as a region is facing were suddenly expected to be solved by taxing organisations, which sounds like a great idea on the front end. But Also, when companies, because let's face it, not everybody can be a business owner, right? If everyone was a business owner, we would have no doers, and that's an issue. So companies are responsible for employment. There are lots of people who don't ever want to work for themselves. There are lots of people who, they want a steady job and a steady salary and to be able to look after their family. And, the UK specifically has a lot of problems in achieving that, right? But companies are large employers. And what happened, in the UK and around the world as the economic climate dipped for individuals, like we've just talked about, it meant that they were finding the cost of selling to their customers was going up. Their profit margins, although incredibly high in a lot of cases, were going down. Suddenly they'd be being asked to fix by politicians the economic challenges that various countries are facing through higher levels of taxation and things like that. And that's not a problem. That doesn't mean that companies can't do it. It doesn't mean that companies won't do it. But it does mean that we experience, certainly in the UK, higher levels of redundancies, higher levels of unemployment than we have done in previous years. Now, again, this is not me saying I agree or disagree politically with anything that's going on, but from a factual perspective, it does mean that, as we go into the final quarter of the year and as we enter September, which is typically a high leaving period anyway for employees who've spent the summer with their families, realise they don't like their job, want to leave, it actually means that there are more people coming into the market who want to be contracting for the companies that they previously worked for, right? We see this every year. Now, again, important to note that this doesn't have to impact your sales process if you've got a strong sales process, right? But if you don't, what can end up happening is these people, because they've got a previous relationship with one company, they'll go, oh, I don't want to work for you anymore as an employee, but I want a contract. I'll do like 3 days a week, or they'll go in and think, okay, I'll set up a business and I'll do fractional consultancy in their area of specialism. And that can end up meaning that, you are competing again against other people who don't have a qualified sales process in place, right? And who can find that problematic. So, again, this isn't a bad thing because a lot of these people don't have qualified sales processes, which means that if you do have a qualified sales process that is generating you at least 5 sales calls a month and is generating you at least 3 sales out of those 5 sales calls, then you're good. You've got nothing to worry about. But if you're not, you are about to see more people coming into the market. And whilst that's not a bad thing, it does mean that you, with your previous experience of selling B2B, need to be really honest about your sales process and about where you need to be fixing it, right? So if it's a lead generation problem, you're not getting enough leads, what are you going to do in the final quarter of the year that's going to generate you more qualified leads? Whether that's proactive or whether that's inbound. If it's that you're not closing at least 3 sales calls out of 5 sales calls into sales, that says you've got a sales call problem. That says that your sales calls aren't working in the right way, right? So what are you going to do about that? If it's that it is taking you longer than 90 days to go from cold lead to closed client, then you have a sales process problem. Because if you are doing deals under 100K in total value, which most of the people listening to this podcast are, and it's taking you more than 90 days to get a sale under 100K, that's a process problem. Something in your sales process isn't working, right? So these are not issues that say, oh my gosh, this is going to be a really tough quarter to sell to corporates. Actually, no. For people who have solid sales processes in place, September will remain the best time of the year because whilst we have some challenging factors in the wider market that are causing more issues with selling to individuals, we also have some things happening that mean that corporates want external suppliers more than ever before. In fact, there was a report this year released that said over 58% of companies were more likely to hire external suppliers this year than ever before, which means there is a lot of room to be selling successfully to companies. But unlike previous years, it is not going to be as common to get lucky, right? And what I've seen since 2020 particularly is people who said, oh yeah, but I do sell to corporates, and it's fine. I do a lot through word of mouth, right? Or they'll go, oh yeah, it's fine. I do sell to corporates, and I just get a few clients, and yeah, it's a bit feast and famine, but I sell to corporates and I get big deals when I get them, so it's fine. What you are going to see, if that's you and you haven't prepped a sales process and you haven't done anything about that, is that your revenue is going to be going down. So it may already be plateauing this year. And you might be thinking, well, hang on, I'm not making as much this time this year as I was this time last year. You might already see that. You might already be seeing your revenue dipping. You might already be hearing, noise about, oh, we don't have budget, and thinking, oh gosh, nobody has budget, nobody has anything, and thinking maybe you need to write a book or make a funnel or, do 100 webinars or something like that. The reality is, if your sales process is not working, it doesn't matter how big the opportunity is for September specifically, and there is a huge opportunity, I'll talk about that in a sec, you are not going to be able to leverage it. So now is the time to look at your sales process and be transparent with yourself. Where are the gaps? Are you not getting enough leads each month? I.e., you are not booking 5 qualified sales calls every single month. Are you not closing a high enough percentage of sales? So for every 5 calls, if you're not closing at least 3, you have a sales call problem, right? So what you need to be doing is be really honest about where your problems are and then solve the problem. Because if you don't, this final quarter of the year is going to be tougher than you've seen it, because you are not going to get lucky in a way that we have in previous years. People are not going to be able to run these loosey-goosey B2B sales processes and get lucky because the decision maker just has time and some cash to splash. That's not going to be the same this year, right? But there are other things coming, and like I say, there are positives to the way that the world is operating this year. So it's not all doom and gloom, basically, which is a win. As long as, and I have to keep caveating that, because otherwise I know people will listen to the whole episode and they'll be like, but Jess said September's still fine, so it's all good. I'm not going to change a thing. And I'll be like, that is not exactly the message that I wanted you to have. So I'm caveating it with, if you have a strong sales process, yes, September still holds a massive opportunity for you and a massive opportunity to generate significant revenue. Because actually, around the world, politically and economically, things are moving. In the UK, we have the autumn budget coming up, and there is a lot of scaremongering around this, particularly for individuals, because it is much more likely this time to impact individuals over businesses. Our Chancellor is going to have to make some hard decisions, and they're potentially going to have to think about the pledges as a government that they made to get into power, because having done the sums, they don't really work, right? So whilst there's a lot of scaremongering about the upcoming autumn budget, it's not as likely to have a drastic impact on companies as it did in the spring, which means that companies are sat on revenue that they want to use, either before the end of a calendar year or before the end of their financial year. And if their financial year doesn't run to calendar year, it's likely that it will run to the end of March, right? So they've got time and they've got money. They also, or the world also, has a focus on keeping the economy moving. And the world knows that companies do that. Whilst there is this sense of general anger at billionaires and, CEOs who are earning millions and forgetting about the huge disparity in earnings and poverty around the world, companies are employing. hundreds and thousands of people around the globe. And they are giving those people money, which those people are then able to exchange for goods. And so companies are keeping the economy moving. You, as a business owner who is earning money, is keeping the economy moving. It's something you should be really proud of, right? You, as a business owner, if you are making money, if you are hiring other people and paying them, you are contributing to a positive economy. And that is what large organizations, whether you like them or you don't, are doing every single day. And these companies have spent lots, and I've talked about this a lot on the podcast over the years, they've spent lots of money working with very smart people on risk management and things that mean in recessive environments, with changing politicians, and therefore changing budget approaches, they are able to survive, thrive, scale, and grow through difficult economies. They are able to do that. So selling to companies still gives you that stability, that ability to scale, that ability to grow your business, even when companies that are selling to individuals, whether they are an online business owner or a big retailer, even when they are finding that it takes longer to acquire a customer, that it's more expensive to acquire an individual customer than ever before, those companies still need external suppliers. They will still hire external suppliers. And again, for the same reason as every other year, September remains that best time because, or for external suppliers certainly to sell to companies, because, we're in that second new year. Companies have realised that there were projects they planned in January that haven't finished yet. They've realised there are projects they planned and work they planned in January that were a priority that haven't even started yet. And their internal resources are stretched because they are being asked to do more with less due to the redundancies and things like that have happened. And that means that external suppliers are incredibly valuable resources because as external suppliers with experience, we're able to go in and immediately pinpoint problems. We're able to go in and provide specialist resource, which would actually take internal resources a lot longer to get up to speed with and make progress with. We also benefit from an external supply because companies don't have to pay for our national insurance costs, for our sick leave, for company car benefits, like all of these other things. So, working with external suppliers provides a high level of specialist resource actually at a lower cost over time. And it doesn't add to their permanent headcount. So if they've been going through redundancy or restructure, this is a positive for them. External suppliers and contractors do not count towards that permanent headcount. So they are still able to meet key targets, right? Like I said earlier, September is also a key budget assessment time. Companies are either looking to use their budget up in line with the calendar year because that's when their financial year runs. This happens a lot with organizations in the US. They will run their budget to the calendar year, or they will run their financial year to the calendar year, And in the UK and around Europe, it's more common to see that budgets and financial year ends will end in March, right? So they're at that 6-month period of we actually have money left and we have projects that we need to finish. So we need to get things done. Yeah, and we have the money to do that. They'll be talking about what's going to come up in this final half of their budget year or the final quarter of their budget year if they're working to the calendar year. And that means that if they don't use that money, they lose it. So now is a good time for them. They have good spending power. They have good resources. It's also a mass leaving period in September. So like I mentioned earlier, people go away on holiday. They spend time with their family. They realise that actually they don't want to go back to their job. And even in this changing work landscape where people have been more hesitant to change jobs because there's always this feeling, especially in redundancy season where it's like last in, first out, people still move and they move at a higher rate than they normally would at other periods in the year. So September tends to be this churn period, which means that organizations need external suppliers because somebody still has to do that job. Somebody still has to make that project happen. Somebody still has to create that change or transformation they were looking for. External providers are able to do that, right? And they have that specialist resource and knowledge and expertise, so they can do it quicker. Yeah. And also we have, again, UK, Europe, gender pay gap reporting is about to start. And that causes some interesting conversations and work around culture and diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is still a priority in Europe. And I know that for our friends in the US, that work is really challenging right now. I want to acknowledge that. That diversity, equity, and inclusion in the US over the last probably 6 to 12 months has been really challenging. And, I'm sending all of the patients and every other good, I'm going to say vibe, but I'm not cool enough, but you know where I'm going with it, right? It's possible, because the US at the moment is in a state of flux when it comes to DEI work. But in the UK and Europe, we have clear laws around equality that still stand. And that means that diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that come up at the end of the calendar year, so things like gender pay gap reporting, but also things like, inclusion initiatives around ADHD, around menopause, around stress awareness, all of those kinds of things. These are also reasons for companies to engage in using external suppliers. And there are lots of these things that come up at the end of the year. In fact, if you're part of the Expert Services Directory, we are giving you a content calendar. Well, it's actually called the Commercial Content Calendar for anyone who's interested. But we've produced this commercial content calendar for you that outlines the key periods in the year and reasons commercially that organizations need to buy from external suppliers at different points. And it goes through month by month. What are the key commercial pieces that are being focused on, so that you can leverage those to go and sell more successfully to companies and create real urgency and create real transformation at those times. All right. So with all of that said and done, I realise this episode has been longer than I expected, and possibly you. And I also realise that it's easy to think, oh gosh, Jess is being negative about September, and I'm really not. What I am trying to say in a much more transparent and direct way than I probably normally would at this time of year, because normally this time of year is like the boom, the second new year, the excitement, the everything, is that this year there are political and economical changes that mean that unless you currently have a working sales process that is booking you 5 sales calls a month and that you are closing 3 out of 5 sales calls, you will need to solve your sales process problems. Because if you don't, your revenue will plateau or dip because of the factors that we've talked about today. If, however, you hone your sales process and you genuinely put the work in and continue to put the work into it being as efficient as you can, and you don't get bored of troubleshooting it, and you continue to hone your skills, actually, you have more opportunity in 2025 in this final quarter of the year to make more selling to corporates than you have made the entire year thus far. Because unlike any other year, there is so much more need for external suppliers into organizations. Organizations are proactively looking for external suppliers to combat headcount issues, to combat projects being unfinished, not started, etc. issues, to combat mass leaving periods. There is so much more opportunity, and they are proactively searching it. But if your sales process isn't working, it doesn't matter how much they're searching, it's still not going to convert for you. So that is my best wish for you this final quarter of the year, is that you put the time and effort into your sales process and you stop, focusing so hard on content creation and, busy work, and you focus significantly on your lead generation, on your business development, on honing those skills that give you the ability to generate more clients, significantly more corporate clients than you have the entire rest of the year thus far. And obviously, if you do need more qualified inbound leads for this final quarter of the year, then make sure you do check out the Expert Services Directory. Like I say, it is for coaches, consultants, and service providers who want to be selling in the UK. And I will be proactively marketing you to over 16,000 decision makers around the UK over the next 12 months. So it's 12 months of opportunities to generate significantly qualified, significantly more interesting inbound leads from professional services, tech firms, charities, and sports organisations around the UK. So if you are interested in that, make sure you check out expertservicesdirectory.com. Very fancy, isn't it? And you can have a look at the new website for it. It's very, very exciting. It went live on the 1st of September. And yeah, it's just super exciting to actually see it in the wild and start getting these epic emails out to decision makers to talk about all the amazing providers that we have across those core specialisms like executive coaching, marketing, finance, change transformation, leadership, health and wellness, other types of coaching, communications, culture, and talent development. So if you are in any of those specialisms and you want to be selling more to corporate clients, you want more qualified inbound leads, make sure you check out expertservicesdirectory.com. And I will see you in the next app.